Hi, welcome to Friday Focus and Mental Health Matters. I am Jane Smith.
And I'm Danielle Dion.
Today we are talking about a really, really important subject that affects us all. We're talking about grief and loss and how to move forward and the 6 stages of grief. And right now during the pandemic, honestly, it's just such an important topic, and we are all experiencing loss and grief right now. We're experiencing loss of loved ones, loss of connection with people, loss of marriages and relationships that have broken down. We're experiencing loss of pets. Some people's pets were all they had. Like, we're going through so much, and we're experiencing loss of events, graduations, marriages, weddings, funerals, people gathering, and a loss of normalcy during the pandemic. So we just think it's so important to share these stages. So what Danielle and I are doing is a 2-part series on grief. So today is part 1, and what we're talking about are the 6 stages of grief, and they were identified by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in 1969 in her book on death and dying. And the stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So a 6th stage was introduced by a man named David Kessler, and he actually co-authored a book with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and it was called On Grief and Grieving. And they came up with a 6th stage, David Kessler did, after he tragically lost his 21-year-old son. And David Kessler, he is a grief expert. That's his field. And when he lost his son, he was so taken aback by the pain that he said he almost felt like he wanted to reach out to everyone he worked with and said, I didn't know your pain was so bad. And so it's meaning. He came up with, after acceptance, they added the 6th stage, which is meaning. And it is so powerful. So yeah, we're going to talk about these stages today. And
I think it's important too, Jane, to talk about how, those 6 stages back in 1969 came out from Elizabeth Kubler's story as well, and her experience traveling to New York and recognizing how those that were grieving and those that were dying were being treated. So she was a real activist for her compassion during that time, and it was out of compassion that these 5 steps were born. And I think it's also just talk about that these stages, it might look like they're in order. However, in all the reading that we've been doing this week and our own experiences we've been sharing, we really recognize that the stages are not linear, that everyone goes through this in a unique way, and that it's like our fingerprint of our love for somebody. So it really is important to recognize that maybe you go through a stage, and if you go back or you go forward or you jump ahead, that's really normal too. And so I think it's not linear, the stages. And both Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler grew in their work because of compassion and experience.
Yeah, so true. And I just think they're both amazing. I don't know about you, Danielle, but I've been blown away by when I started researching this, because I know a lot of people that are going through loss right now, and I've gone through loss with people. We've all gone through it. But recently I find there's been a lot of loss, and the 6 stages are there, like it's coping. These are like coping stages to help you. So like Danielle says, it's not linear. So you could be in denial and anger, and then you go back to denial. You can start to accept and go, then you can go to bargaining. So we're going to talk about each stage so people understand exactly what they are. And I find you can relate them to losses you're experiencing in the pandemic. They are loss. If you've lost a job, if you've had to retire, if you've had to cancel a wedding, if you've lost a pet, these are the stages will help you.
Yeah, and I think we should, as we go through the stages, just a little touch up on, or touch point on how that we see that in the pandemic too. So I think, let's just go through those 6 stages, Jane, and, uncover what the we can right now in this short time, and know that next week we're going to have Hayley Yarish join us. So I'm super excited about having her join us in this conversation. I think anybody who's going through grief or has experienced grief, and then pretty much all of us, could definitely be better informed by knowing her and her work.
Yeah.
So awesome.
That's our part 2. Yes. So we're excited about that. Okay. So let's talk about the first stage of grief. The first stage is denial. Makes complete sense. Shock denial. So denial helps us to pace our feelings of grief. There is a grace in denial. It's nature's way of letting in only as much as we can handle. And when I read that, I thought that is so powerful, that we all have in us like a natural, it's just natural that we can't handle it all at once. So denial lessens it a bit at the beginning.
I think that's I love that too. It was this week, I think, where it really became an aha moment for me, where I recognized that sometimes I've judged people or judged my own thoughts and feelings about, oh, they're in denial. Oh, you need to face this. And it really hit me this week. Wow, that is a really powerful coping tool, survival mechanism that our body does for us. Denial is essentially a gift because we can only take on so much stress. And when we're in overload, we naturally give up what we're not ready to handle. And so when we recognize denial as this gift and a process like that, it really is magnificent how beautiful we are, and also how it's really strong, like putting trust in ourselves, and that we're going to get through. And it's okay, to see somebody that's in denial, and it's okay to offer them compassion. It doesn't mean they're weak. It actually means that they're really strong right now.
Yeah. Do you know, when I was 17, I think I told you this before, and I thought, wow, when I read these stages, because you can go back to in your own personal history of life and grief and think, wow, I did go through those stages. When I was 17 years old, I had a girlfriend killed suddenly. She died in a tragic accident. Her name was Jackie Whitaker. She was just full of life and beautiful. And I was 17, and my young brain, I realize now, could not handle it. Like, because that's the age of resilient. You think you're resilient, nothing will ever happen. So when she died suddenly, I just felt like she went on a trip. I always, for years, felt like she would come back from Europe or something. Like, I think I just stayed in denial as a young girl for a long time. I couldn't handle it.
Well, and I think that's an important story, Jane, and thanks for sharing that. Jackie Whitaker. I love saying names of those that have passed and put them in the space, because denial is really, we see it in the streets of Vancouver. We see it everywhere. We see people that we judge, oh, they're in denial, and I think, for my own experience of trauma, my brain has literally said, no, you don't remember that. And that did not happen. And then it comes up later, right? Or, people that are just in any stage of understanding what's happening with their life. Denial is a natural coping skill that our body does for us so that we can manage and live in our daily lives in a way that we can stay somewhat healthy. So denial is really personal, and it's really intimate, and people do deal with their stuff over time. And it's an important step to recognize with compassion.
It is. Okay. So the second stage of grief is anger. And I find this interesting. And because, and this is from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work. These are quotes from her and from her book, and David Kessler. So anger is a necessary stage of the healing process. You need to feel your anger, and the more you truly feel it, the more it will begin to dissipate, and the more you will heal. Anger gives you strength to move forward, which is very powerful.
It is so true. Like, you see protests, you see those that stand in the fire of justice that are making actual change in this world, because often, and I would say mostly, if they're really in the heat of it, they have some experience where they've been hurt, and they recognize that all they can do is get in there and empower others to change and change systems. So anger is empowering. And for some weird reason out there, anger has this bad reputation, like it's a bad thing. And of course, if we put our anger in a way that's irresponsible and we harm ourselves or others, then there needs to be an intervention, I think.
And it's a controlled anger.
Yes.
It's anger, but it's controlled. It's our feeling, it's our anger. It's something in us that will drive us forward to do something. And it's okay to be angry. If someone's been planning a wedding, like dreaming of their wedding since they were 5 years old, and it's canceled because of the pandemic, you have a right to be angry. You have a right to be angry. I think it's how long people sit in it. Or if someone dies suddenly, there's just anger. It's okay. But that's what's going to move you forward and give you strength and move towards healing.
And that's it exactly. Like, where are you going to take this anger? What does it look like? It's one thing to think it and feel it and have the emotion. That's really normal. And how do you behave when you're angry? Right? So under those that have grief and loss and been through trauma and that are sitting in anger and out there hurting the world even more, it's kind of hypocritical to go out and continue pain. Yet we see it and we need to recognize that that's normal, and not everybody can come up with ways of being angry in a safe way. Yes. And but I know for myself, Jane, if there's anything that's led me to my passion of supporting parents to resolve conflict around kids, or with kids, or I would definitely say it's my story with my dad. So I lived in an incredibly interesting home, and when I grew up, and I still rage. I'm still ragey that he died and he never spoke his story. I'm still mad that I have to carry that trauma, and at the same time, that anger isn't something now that is a dirty feeling. It's not a nefarious feeling. It's not a back alley deal. Like, I'm mad, I need to go get revenge. It's like, no, I'm mad that this still is happening to kids. I'm mad that people still aren't able to tell their story. And that tells me that anger that I have has been really helpful in my healing.
Wow. That's powerful. That's amazing. So that's where you can see that from what your relationship with your dad was and losing your dad is giving you an inner strength to do something amazing and to make a difference, right?
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay, so the third stage, we're moving on to the third stage, and it is bargaining. This is interesting, and I think when you go back again in your own history or other people that you have seen, or helped through grief, bargaining it's when you strike a deal to cope. When you're like, you in your mind, it's like, if only I had done this, then maybe this would have been different. If only I had, maybe taken whoever, my loved one, to a doctor's appointment early, we would have caught their illness. If only I had, it's a bargaining thing that happens. If I'd made this decision, my life would have been different. And also I think bargaining of like, why did you take them and not me? Why am I still here? Why did I survive an accident and they didn't? There's this whole internal bargaining that happens.
When I was reading about this, I thought, wow, this is the one that I feel like stays forever. We question grief. We have all these questions about it because death is unknown. There's no surefire way. There's no fact on what happens after. We only know 2 facts in life: change and death. That's it. Right. And so bargaining, it seems like when I was writing about it and journaling about grief this week, I noticed that this one is I don't know if it's a phase. I think it's a lifelong, like, why did that happen? What if how about if I did this? What would it be now if? And so I really think that bargaining is a real healthy tool as well, because it puts the mystery in life, and it makes us have to live in the moment. When you've been through grief and you have loss and you question all of that, I think the way we live our daily lives kind of shifts a bit, and we start recognizing what's really important, saying I love you, connecting with people we love, and seeing when people are in pain and sharing and giving our ear to them. So I think when those of us have bargained a lot, right, or been through a lot of grief, that you recognize just how mighty important it is to do the little things
Yeah.
because you don't want to question that later. If
I think
only
that,
yes.
yeah, I think bargaining is super interesting, and it's almost gives you go from anger to bargaining, almost an empowerment. You start to question you're mad at the world. You've gone into the bargaining stage. You'd be like, oh, and then there's compassion and empathy in there, because you're like, why not me? Like, why them? They were an amazing person. Why didn't, so, and it does lead, I think, into the fourth stage, which is depression. So the fourth stage, it's in grief, depression is a way for nature to keep us protected by shutting down our nervous system so that we can adapt to something we feel we cannot handle. Depression is crucial to healing, as it allows us to move through the feelings and release them.
And
isn't that amazing? I was like, it's not like you think, oh, I'm going to be in a deep depression because I've lost someone. There's just all different levels, and it can just be sadness and a feeling of depression as you heal.
It's so interesting, that this was a stage and also a clinical diagnosis, right? So that one took me a little bit of a deeper dive where I was like, okay, we're all new at a lot of this, and every week you and I investigate these things. We're just people that are looking at these topics. And I think for this one, because I work in mental health and also have a clinical depression diagnosis and been looking at that for a very long time about like, what is that? I recognize, I had to kind of separate, like, there's situational depression. That's really normal. It is really okay to go through stages of depression. And also, that's a way of coping with stress. So what does our stress habit look like? And be aware, and watch if somebody's grieving right now, or if they are showing signs of depression. It might be a good idea to check in to see, like, is this something that is becoming chronic, and watching how their daily lives are happening, and do they need extra help? And because I think it's over time, if depression, it goes untreated or unacknowledged or unvalidated or unheard, I think there is more of a risk here where it starts to be like, okay, I'm grieving, and now that grief can go into a place of like long-term trauma and could really get entrenched in our habits. And we could get stuck. So this is a really important stage to watch and to monitor, I think, because living with depression, chronic depression, is definitely something that is you're stuck, and it's really, really difficult to produce joy and to feel pleasure. And so
I think it's important for all of us. Like, I think, like, through this pandemic, for us to step up and be aware of friends and people in our circle, if they're okay, especially older people that are alone, or people that are not acting normal, that are depressed. It's our responsibility to, if someone is going through grieving, and that is the loss of things in the pandemic, how long have they been depressed? How long have they not been able to get out of bed? I mean, they need help. So I think it's important for us to take responsibility to say, like, just be aware of what people are going through. And if you know this is a stage, be like, wow, they've really been in this low, sad, depressed stage. Maybe you can get them out in nature, or there's a whole nother.
All those other connection pieces, right?
Yeah.
So important. Like, what are our habits when we are sad? What do we do, when this stuff is happening? But I like where you're going. I think all of this is really a responsibility of individuals and of collectively. To recognize and validate, and normalize, and to listen and observe and to care, all of that.
Yeah, that's why I think these stages are important for people to be aware of them. I wasn't aware of them before. Now I can take them and be like, oh wow, I can see this how this person is going through this in their life. So we'll move on to the fifth stage, is acceptance. So acceptance is not about liking a situation. It is about acknowledging all that has been lost and learning to live with that loss. It is when we accept that life looks different now and we will be okay. That's what acceptance is. That's one of the quotes from his book. So I think it's like, your life is going to be different now. You're accepting that it's different and that you will be okay. And that, it's interesting.
it's about learning to continue to live, right? So not just be alive, but actually to live, to put it into like behavior. Like, I'm going to continue to live. I can accept that reality of loss. And I think it's also recognizing that you can continue to love. It's so important. So I think that acceptance piece is bringing it all the way kind of around and saying, you know what, I can still love that person. Even when I'm here, I can still shine knowing that I love them. And I can say their name out loud, or we can light a candle or go visit them wherever they are in their grave, or put flowers out there, or talk about them, or be inspired by them. So there's still ways of accepting and showing acceptance, or behaving in acceptance.
Yeah, I think it is like, I think what I found so fascinating was this Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, her work. And then when David Kessler, when he worked with her and he wrote books with her, it was near the end of her life, that they wrote these two books together. But for him to be this expert, and then to suddenly get that phone call that his son has died. I was listening to him this morning, and his story, like he said, he knew he was a grief expert, but he was just a dad that had lost a son. And he could feel himself going through all the stages. He could be like, I'm depressed, and he went through them all because he's human. But when he got to acceptance, he had so much trouble because he said it felt so final, that when he was in that, am I actually in the acceptance stage? He felt like, no, like it's too final. Grief doesn't end. It's not over when you come to acceptance.
Wow.
So what's interesting is that's when he came up with that you need meaning. And he went to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her family and asked if he could adapt the stages. And they add this one more stage, which is in the book on grief and grieving. And it's honestly, so the 6th stage is meaning. And honestly, it is so important. So important.
It's so important.
So I didn't read the thing. Well, moving on to the 6th stage. So meaning transforms our love and sorrow into something rich and fulfilling. Your loss is not a test. It's not a lesson or something to handle. It's not a gift. It's not a blessing. Loss is simply what happens to you in life. Meaning is what you make happen. And it's unbelievable. I thought, I can see how important this is. And because you would start talking about people honoring, and it's not one thing, Danielle, that I thought was interesting is someone had asked David Kessler, well, there's no meaning in the death of a child they had lost. They were like, how can you say there's meaning? So then he clarified. He said, no, there's no meaning in the death. There's no meaning in the death or that they died. It's looking at the meaning of their life. Their life had meaning.
How powerful.
Yeah.
And I think that's, when you see meaning then, and, what came up for me this week, Jane, was you see like that first stage, right? Denial. And that's really about grace, right? Your body offering you this gift of grace. Like, we're going to give you some grace right now while you manage all the stuff and the harder stuff. And then when it gets to meaning, it's about courage. It's about really living your life as, in love, living your life and making something of that life that lived. It's like carrying on that beautiful story. It's carrying on your beautiful relationship that you had, and everything knew about that person. What would they want this world to be like? What was their story? How do I continue that legacy for them? How do I make meaning into this pain and turn it, like we're conduits of pain and love, right? So what came up, it goes from grace to courage. Like, what does it mean to actually feel this pain and then let it be in you, let that pain be real, and at the same time be responsible, and then let it out and have courage to tell the story in your own way. Live it.
And sometimes people feel like you need to get over it. Oh, that person that you lost died 5 years ago. No, you don't ever get over it. You move forward, you celebrate them, you talk about them. If you've lost a sibling, a sister, just as an example, when you're 80, your sister would have been 82. You celebrate it. You don't sit in it forever, but you think about them. They live on in you. And David Kessler said something so interesting. He said a lot of people have trouble moving on because they almost feel like they shouldn't be happy because the person is lost, whether it's like a loved one is gone. And he looks at them and he says, so where do you think your loved one is now? How do you think they are now? And he says most often the person will say, I think they're at peace and I think they're moving on, like in the afterlife, whatever you believe. So they'll say, oh, they're free, they're out of pain. And he said, you have the right to be free and live too. Wow. So if you can say, when you ask someone what they feel their loved one is
right, yeah.
Now. So you're entitled to peace too. I thought that was
that.
Yeah. So
that is, I love that.
I know, but he also said about his son on the meaning, when he came up with meaning. So here his son died at 21. And he said that when his little boy was in kindergarten, the teacher said, your son, David, is going to be a helper one day. He's going to help a lot of people because he had that personality. And so then when his son died and he was in acceptance, he thought he was someone that was going to help people. How can I bring meaning to his life? And the book, Finding Meaning, came out and is really helping so many people because of his son. Isn't that so? There's huge meaning for his son now.
And I know that was a story just our family lost my cousin a couple of years ago, and it's still really raw for us all because it was such a surprise. She was just my age, and
so sad.
I think it was really something, and it is still. And I think about my beautiful aunt, who is such a light in my life, and how she just mobilized herself and was like, you know what she would have wanted is to keep everybody warm outside. So we gathered socks and we spent time out at the Wally Strip offering warmth and in honor of her. And, it's just, people do things, once they find some meaning, it's like they're propelled to do better and they're propelled to make life better for others. And I think that's the legacy of love and loss, is that meaning is what does it mean for you? And what is the individual story that you want to tell? And I like too what you said there about David Kubler-Ross's story, how, how do you feel that way after you're an expert?
David Kessler?
I got the name. David Kessler. So how he had meaning, right?
Yeah.
With that, and he was an expert and he's human.
I know.
So we really need to humanize this and normalize talking about grief and see it and not avoid it, because it's just as common as life itself.
Yeah. And he said that grief, people ask, what is the worst grief you can go through? He said the worst grief is your own grief. And so then he said someone in their life might never have lost a loved one, but they say their wedding was canceled or it was a loss of a pet or whatever it is. That's their biggest grief they've ever gone through in their life. So at whatever grief, it's yours that is the most painful because you're dealing with it. And I thought I have a really beautiful friend, one of my best friends from high school, who lost her sister, and it was really difficult. I went through that whole grieving process with her, and she's learned so much, and it's been so difficult. I've seen the pain, but I realize now, going through these stages, that I'll never know what she experienced. It almost makes me cry. I felt like I could almost feel it, but there's no way. There's just no way that I could have felt what she was going through. But the interesting thing is there is meaning, and her name is Jill, beautiful Jillian White, just the most beautiful soul. So my sister did a painting for Jill, a pansy painting, and it was they raised money for cancer. And I have the painting. A lot of Jill and her friends have it hanging in their homes.
Wow.
Pansy. And it's signed Jillian's flower.
Oh my goodness.
And I look at it every day and I feel like there's so much meaning in that. If Jill only knew how they raised a lot of money for cancer. But now I was looking at the steps, I realized that was just an important part of Jill. you know what I mean? Now I see the stages of healing. And
right. What an experience. So sorry for
yeah.
your friend and Jill. You know, I think that's, well, it's also powerful, Jane, but I think the step of meaning is the one where I like to think that we can get to, and that we can, I think the more we talk about death, the more we talk about grief, the more it becomes normal to go through the stages and see the stages. Once we're able for others to recognize these stages and care a little bit more, nurture these stages a little bit more, and also hold people responsible for how we would behave when we're grieving. I think that's important. I just
also
think
that a reminder that they are not linear. You can go through these stages and go back. You can be in meaning and go back to denial. I mean, it happens. So it's something that they're coping. There's stages to help you cope and move forward. And so that
right now, in the pandemic, like quickly run through the denial. How much, I'm not wearing this mask. This isn't happening. Anger. We see it every day in the protests. Bargaining. Well, what about this? What about that? You know, what if only China did this or whatever? Depression is on the rise. Acceptance. There's many people that are like, you know what? There's going to be a third wave, a 16th wave. We're going to do this. And then meaning. What is the meaning right now of this pandemic, Jane? And what do we take from all of this?
I think one thing is I think becoming more compassionate people and realizing the importance of connection, and that we all need to stay connected because it's been taken away. And sometimes something is taken away for you to really see it and really appreciate it. But
absolutely,
I know it's not an easy time. So I want people to know that I put this up grief.com because that is David Kessler's website. It is incredible. If you go on there, if anyone that's going through grief, whether it is a loss of a loved one or anything you're going through because of the pandemic, if you go to his website, he actually has a Facebook group to help you through it. You just join it for free. And I think it would help a lot of people. So I just wanted to put that up so people know, because his website's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And then
amazing.
I think we're going to finish up and talk about next week. So this is a part 2 series, and Danielle has invited a beautiful woman on.
So I'm so excited to have Hayley Yarish join us. We used to work together. This is somebody who is absolutely, I would say, a master at the discussion around grief. She walks through her life with such a beautiful heart, and we are, to have her join Peace 360 and Friday for this next week is an important part. So she's an expert, and having Hayley Yarish join us next week is where we're going to be in part 2. And let's discuss this in a deeper way. How do we heal? Do we ever heal? And let's hear from Hayley.
Yeah, we're excited. So thank you everyone for watching. We appreciate it. We really, goal with Friday Focus and Mental Health Matters is to help people create more peace in their life, and just to be able to, if we can all find peace and healing in ourselves, then we are better humans when we're out in the world, and we can make a difference. So thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.